From the top floor of Halcyon Tower, New York looked unreal, like a circuit board glowing beneath glass. Adrian Vale stood alone in the penthouse office he rarely used, hands in his pockets, watching people shrink into dots below. Once, this city had thrilled him. Now, it only reminded him how far away he had drifted from it. Adrian was a billionaire before 40, founder of one of the world's most influential tech platforms. His face appeared on magazine covers, his quotes framed in offices, yet he felt strangely absent from the world he shaped. Meetings blurred together, numbers lost meaning, and people spoke to him like he was no longer human, but a force of nature. That night, after another board call filled with flattery and fear, Adrian made a quiet decision. If power had insulated him from reality, then he would step outside it. Not publicly, not symbolically, but invisibly. The janitor's uniform smelled faintly of bleach and old fabric. Adrian stared at himself in the locker room mirror, barely recognizing the man staring back. The billionaire was gone, replaced by someone anonymous, replaceable, unseen. He pulled the cap low, hiding the face once known across Silicon Valley. The badge read A. Vale, no title, no wealth attached. Just a name and a job description. The simplicity was unsettling and freeing. When he stepped into the hallway with a mop and cart, no one looked twice. That was the moment it hit him. Invisibility was not an accident. It was a condition many lived in every day. The building changed after midnight. The confidence of daylight drained away, replaced by quiet footsteps and whispered exhaustion. Adrian cleaned floors others walked past without thought, hearing fragments of lives in late-night phone calls and sighs. Security guards nodded politely but never asked questions. Cleaning staff spoke softly among themselves, sharing snacks, aches, and worries. No one asked what he did before. No one assumed he mattered beyond the task at hand. For the first time in years, Adrian listened without being listened to, and it unsettled him more than any boardroom confrontation ever had. Maria worked the same shift every night, vacuuming offices with a precision that bordered on art. She hummed softly as she worked, pausing occasionally to stretch her aching back. When Adrian helped her move a heavy trash bin, she smiled in gratitude. "Thank you," she said, like it mattered. They talked about nothing and everything. Her kids, her rent, her dream of owning a small bakery. Adrian realized he had funded startups worth billions yet never met the people who cleaned their hallways. Some floors were abandoned, failed startups, canceled projects, forgotten ambitions. Adrian cleaned desks still covered in dusty awards and dried-out plants. He recognized some logos. He remembered shutting them down with a single email. Now, he stood among the ruins of decisions he barely recalled making. That night, guilt replaced curiosity. He wasn't just disconnected from people. He had erased parts of them without ever seeing their faces. Thomas had worked security for 22 years. He drank black coffee and spoke slowly, like time had worn his words smooth. "People think nothing happens at night," Thomas said once. "But this is when you see who people really are." Adrian nodded, realizing Thomas saw more humanity from a folding chair than he did from a corner office. Adrian began to notice patterns. Executives avoided eye contact. Employees left trash scattered carelessly. No one apologized. Invisibility wasn't cruelty, it was habit. People didn't choose to ignore janitors. They were trained to. That realization disturbed Adrian more than outright malice ever could. One night, Maria cried quietly in the supply closet. Her paycheck was late. Rent was due. Adrian stood there helpless, knowing he could solve the problem instantly, but revealing himself would destroy the experiment. For the first time, his wealth felt like a cage. Adrian wrote rules for himself. No favors, no reveals, no interference, yet understanding had to come before action. Otherwise, he'd just be another rich man playing savior. One evening, Adrian watched the current CEO of Halcyon stride past, barking into a headset, stepping over a wet floor sign. Adrian felt a strange anger. Not at the man, but at the version of himself he used to be. Power didn't corrupt. It isolated. In the break room, janitors shared food, stories, and laughter. They joked about aches and dreams deferred. No one talked about stock prices. Yet the room felt richer than any executive lounge Adrian had ever built. An elevator stalled with 3 cleaners inside. Adrian helped calm them until maintenance arrived. Later, one said, "You're good under pressure." Adrian almost laughed. He'd negotiated billion-dollar deals. But this moment mattered more. Adrian quietly extended night shift maintenance budgets. No announcements, no credit, lights stayed on longer. Equipment improved. Morale shifted slightly. No one knew why, but they felt it. Thomas admitted he once wanted to be a teacher. Maria spoke again of her bakery. Adrian went home and couldn't sleep. How many dreams had his empire quietly stepped over? That night, Adrian asked himself the question that would change everything. What is the point of building the future if the present is invisible to you? He knew the experiment could not stay secret forever. And when it ended, nothing, including him, would be the same. Adrian had worn many identities in his life. Visionary, disruptor, billionaire, but none were as demanding as being ordinary. Each night, pretending to be unseen required more discipline than commanding a room full of executives. Small slips began to appear. He spoke too carefully, asked questions others didn't. Once, he corrected a software engineer's comment about a system architecture, then quickly blamed it on something he overheard once. People noticed. Not suspicion yet. Curiosity. Elliot, a junior engineer, stayed late every night, chasing deadlines that never seemed to end. One night, he spoke to Adrian without looking up. "They don't know what it's like down here," Elliot said bitterly. "Decisions rain down. We just deal with the mess." Adrian felt the words land like a quiet indictment. He had once believed distance made leadership clearer. Now he wondered if it only made it crueler. Coffee spilled across an executive office, soaking documents. Adrian cleaned it carefully, reading performance reviews left carelessly on the desk. A name caught his eye: Maria's son, listed as an intern candidate. The review was dismissive, almost lazy. Adrian felt the weight of knowing how easily lives were redirected by unchecked authority. Adrian started writing again, notes, not code. Observations about dignity, labor, blindness. He realized technology hadn't failed people. Leadership had. He began drafting something radical, a company model built around human presence, not hierarchy. The janitor's cart became his confessional. A cleaner named Ruth didn't show up one night. By morning, word spread. She'd quit after a manager humiliated her publicly. No apology. No consequence. Adrian cleaned her usual floors that night. Each swipe of the mop felt like a quiet accusation. Adrian attended a board meeting by day, smiling, nodding, approving policies. By night, he scrubbed toilets affected by those same decisions. The duality nearly broke him. He realized power without listening was not leadership, it was control. Maria finally admitted she was behind on rent. Her voice was calm, practiced, like someone used to swallowing panic. Adrian wanted to end the experiment right there, to fix it, to be Adrian Vale again. But restraint, he realized, was the final lesson. Janitors talked, quietly, about unfair schedules, about managers who yelled, about promises never kept. Adrian listened, collecting truths no consultant report would ever reveal. This was the company's real data stream, and it had been ignored. One night, cleaners worked slower, took proper breaks, refused unsafe shortcuts. Supervisors complained. Productivity metrics dipped. Adrian smiled behind his cap. For once, the numbers told a human story. An accident happened. A cleaner slipped, injured badly. Paperwork buried the incident in neutral language. Adrian read it later and felt something harden inside him. Silence, he learned, was expensive, just not for the powerful. Elliot showed Adrian his resignation email before sending it. "They don't care," he said. "Why should I?" Adrian had no answer, only a quiet shame. Adrian refused to use his wealth secretly to fix individual problems. Felt dishonest now. Change had to be systemic, or it was just charity dressed as guilt. Standing alone on the roof after a long shift, Adrian looked at the city again. this time from below the penthouse. The city didn't look smaller anymore. It looked heavier. Adrian began planning the end. Not theatrically, not dramatically. Truth, he decided, should arrive quietly, like a janitor finishing his shift. On his final night as a janitor, Adrian cleaned every floor slowly, deliberately. He memorized faces, voices, stories. Tomorrow he would return as himself. But he would never be the same man who left. Adrian woke before dawn, staring at the janitor's uniform folded neatly on a chair. For weeks it had been his armor. Now it felt like a relic of a life that had quietly reshaped him. When he dressed in his tailored suit again, the fabric felt heavier than before. The mirror reflected a man with authority, but now also with knowledge he could no longer ignore. The executive team assembled in the main auditorium, expecting another strategic briefing. Adrian stood at the podium, calm, measured. "I've spent the last year working nights in this building," he said. "As a janitor." Silence spread like a shockwave. Some laughed nervously. Others froze. Adrian continued, not seeking approval, only truth. Emails exploded. Headlines followed within hours. PR teams scrambled to reframe the story as a social experiment. But Adrian refused spin. He shared details only a janitor could know. Names, incidents, patterns. Truth has a way of cutting through disbelief. Maria saw him on the screen in the break room. Her hands shook. "That's him," she whispered. "That's Adrian." When Adrian met her eyes later that day, he didn't apologize. He thanked her for trusting a stranger. Board members called it reckless, dangerous, bad for stock confidence. Adrian listened, then asked a single question. "If dignity hurts our valuation, what exactly are we selling?" No one answered. New policies rolled out, not drafted by consultants but shaped by lived nights. Guaranteed on-time pay. Anonymous reporting with real consequences. Mandatory executive night shifts, no exceptions. The building exhaled. Thomas addressed management for the first time in 22 years. "We don't want favors," he said. "We want respect." The room stood silent, not out of fear, but recognition. Ruth was offered her job back, this time with protection and an apology. She accepted, not because she had to, but because she chose to. Choice, Adrian realized, was the real currency. Elliot withdrew his resignation. "They listened," he told Adrian. "That's new." Adrian nodded. Change didn't require perfection, just presence. Stock analysts noticed something odd. Productivity rose. Turnover dropped. Engagement spiked. Humanity, it turned out, scaled. Adrian refused glamour interviews. He spoke instead at labor forums, night schools, small auditoriums. "We optimized everything," he said, "except empathy." The message spread faster than any product launch. Other companies followed. Some sincerely, some performatively. Adrian didn't chase them. Example was louder than enforcement. Maria's Bakery opened quietly in Queens. No investors. No branding deal. Adrian attended as a customer, paid in cash, and said nothing. Adrian created a permanent board seat, reserved for a rotating frontline worker. Power, redistributed, felt lighter. Months later, Adrian returned for one night, uniform on, mop in hand. This time people saw him, and treated him the same. The building at night no longer felt hollow. Laughter echoed softly from break rooms. Conversations lingered instead of vanishing when supervisors passed. Adrian noticed these things as he pushed the mop, not as the founder, but as a witness. Silence still existed, but it had changed. It was no longer fear. It was rest. For the first time, Adrian understood that culture wasn't designed. It was permitted. Change was easy in headlines, harder in habit. Managers slipped. Old instincts resurfaced. Adrian resisted the urge to intervene publicly each time. Systems had to stand without him. Leadership, he realized, meant resisting the temptation to be the hero. Consistency, not charisma, would decide whether this experiment survived. Interns rotated through night shifts as part of onboarding, not to suffer but to understand. Young hires spoke differently now. Less entitlement, more awareness. Adrian smiled quietly. The future was learning before it forgot. A sudden market downturn tested everything. Advisors urged layoffs. Automation proposals resurfaced. Adrian gathered stories instead of spreadsheets. "We will cut costs," he said. "Not dignity." The room held its breath and then agreed. Thomas's retirement party was held in the lobby he'd guarded for decades. When he hugged Adrian, he whispered, "You listened." That, Adrian thought, was the highest praise leadership could earn. Maria expanded her bakery. A second oven. 2 new employees. She never mentioned Adrian's name. She didn't have to. Independence tasted sweeter than gratitude. Publishers begged for a memoir. Adrian declined. The story, he believed, belonged to everyone who'd lived it. Some truths lost power when owned by one voice. Other buildings adopted the model. Some failed. Some flourished. Adrian learned influence didn't require control, only integrity. Adrian signed one final policy: executive bonuses tied to lowest paid worker stability. Wealth, redirected, began to circulate instead of pool. From the penthouse, the city looked different now, not smaller, not larger, just shared. Elliot wrote years later from a startup of his own. "We built it the way you taught us," the letter read. Adrian closed his eyes, satisfied. The janitor's uniform was framed, not as a trophy, but a reminder. Power was never meant to be worn alone. New janitors joined. New stories unfolded. The system held. That was the real success. Adrian finally answered his old question. The point of building the future was to honor the present. Adrian Vale remained a billionaire. But he was remembered for something rarer. He was the man who learned to see.